This is episode number 26 with Elizabeth Dennehy. Coming up.
We always had crappy cars that blew black smoke from the engine into the car, cars that had no floors. It's hard to do something when you don't know if you're going to succeed at it. That's scary. It's really scary. I can't think of another field where you can actually be the best at what you do and nobody knows or cares.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking profession. So after the 75th time of you biting into a meatball, and if you can make that seem like it's the first time, that's gold. You know, it's really, really hard to do. Yeah. I can't say he would have ever won Father of the Year, but I do think watching your father pursue what he loves doing is a wonderful role model.
If you're looking for what it takes to be an actor long-term over the course of your life, then you've come to the right place and you're going to really enjoy today's episode. Today's guest came from very humble beginnings, saw her dad's struggle with his own career, decided her family was a priority, worked even more when she was pregnant, and has found ways to help other actors. Hey there, this is Nathan Agan, and welcome to the Working Actor's Journey, connecting you with lifelong professionals. Welcome back for Season 5. I'm really thrilled to bring you 5 more great interviews this season, and today we're kicking it off with actress Elizabeth Dennehy. For those who are new here, this podcast is designed to show you how the work is done, what the realities of the working actor life are like, and to share all the different ways actors have come to this career. There is no one path and no single answer. We want to learn from all of those further down the road, to shorten the learning curve and to discover what helps and what doesn't when it comes to having a lifelong career as an actor. Now honestly, I had no idea what was going to happen after Season 3 2 years ago, and I mean before the pandemic happened. I just wasn't sure what was next, but pretty quickly I pulled some things together, and before I knew it, we had some great workshops going, which really became a super collaborative project and a lot of fun to do. I want to say that all of the guests this season were largely unknown to me. Some I didn't even know of at all 2 years ago. And that's been one of the great joys of the pandemic, having all this time, and with the workshops, is that I've been able to meet and get to know many more actors and professionals, and I'm thrilled I can bring them onto the podcast. So our guest today, Elizabeth Dennehy, has been working for 30-plus years with 50-plus film and TV credits and hundreds of commercials. She has acted at major regional theaters across the country and is an original creator and cast member of Tony and Tina's Wedding. She is a graduate of Hofstra University, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and studied at Shakespeare's Globe in London. And yes, she's also the daughter of actor Brian Dennehy, who shuffled off his mortal coil in 2020 after a long and celebrated career. Among many other things, we talk about pursuing the dream, seeing it with her father, and then doing it herself. Plus, we get another mini-Shakespeare class where Elizabeth dives into a piece from Macbeth. She's been an audition coach for years and has also helped many students with their college auditions, so you'll definitely want to check this out. And speaking of Shakespeare, we have an upcoming workshop in April 2022 with Rando Duk Kim and Annie Okio Grosso from episode 25. They are workshopping a couple scenes from King Lear, and you can either be in the scene with Randy as Lear, a part he played to acclaim at American Players Theater, or be part of the virtual audience. They have been working professionally for 50-plus years and are sharing the discoveries and ideas they have about Shakespeare's first folio. For a sneak peek, check out our text work episode with them on Hamlet, which has been one of our most popular episodes ever. It's pretty amazing what they can reveal. This approach can help you with lots of material besides Shakespeare. Randall and Annie will teach you how to find answers to the many questions that great actors need to ask. Head to workingactorsjourney.com to find out more and sign up. Space is limited. Just a couple other bits of business I want to share quickly. There's also a new free guide to download. It's called Keys the Pros Use to Unlock Any Script. This shares the actual questions, approach, and process the professionals use when working on any material, plays, scripts, audiobooks, and more, from those who've done the work. And as a bonus, you'll also receive the full Working Actor's Journey kit, including all the other guides and more. There's wisdom from Armin Shimmerman, Elizabeth Dennehy, Tony Amendola, director Brendan Fox, dramaturg Gideon Rappaport, and more. Get your copy of the guide now at workingactorsjourney.com/sign up, and to make it easy, there's also a link in the episode description. Now, if you're really enjoying this podcast and want more, you can become a patron. Starting at just $2 per month, get exclusive access to behind-the-scenes and additional content, and be part of taking this show to the next level. And for those who join at the co-star level or higher, just $5 or more per month, you also receive a 10% discount on our workshops and programs, including that April Shakespeare workshop with Randall and Annie. Okay, the business stuff is all set. Now, I had a great time with Elizabeth, and it's a fantastic chat. There's lots of honesty, lots of realness looking at the biz, especially from one who saw someone with so much success, and a great practical attitude about it all. Once again, it really shows there are many ways into and through this business. Whether your parent is a major film star or not, you still find your own way. So whatever your situation is, you've got to want it and work at it. And her dad? He was proof that he really had to work at it for a long time before it paid off. And as you'll hear, he was very lucky. So here we go with episode number 26. Please enjoy my chat with Elizabeth Dennehy. I wanted to ask how her class is going.
Yeah, it's great because I love my subject matter. I do teach Shakespeare to 10th graders. Mm-hmm. I think everybody is adjusting to life after remote learning.
Sure.
We were teaching on Zoom for 18 months and not going into school. And now we are teaching and learning. We're wearing masks, which is so difficult when you're a theater teacher and especially a Shakespeare teacher, where articulation and diction and enunciation and projection are everything. So very, very challenging. I've got a great group of kids, super talented, very talented. We're doing well. The last time these kids were in person in a normal school sense, where face to face, was like they were 7th graders. Wow. So it's a huge adjustment. I have 36 teenagers who auditioned to get into the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. So they want to be there. They care about theater. Every year you have some students who are a little dubious about if they're going to like Shakespeare, if they're going to be engaged, and they need some prodding and some encouragement that it's for everybody and you can do this. And some kids are blowing my mind right now. That the most reticent, not apathetic, but just dubious, doubtful that this is for them, have been blowing my mind. So we just did paraphrase the speech and put it into your own words.
Yep.
And I was so shocked at how much they understood what they were saying when they put it into their own words. It was really cool.
That's great. Well, I mean, I'm glad that, you guys are able to gather together in person and have that experience, albeit a little stifled in some ways, or like you said with the masks. And I've heard that from other teachers that theater is not designed to be done with half masks. Maybe the full masks, like the Greeks, that kind of thing. You could do a more representative performance, but yeah, the half masks I think are tough. And kids, I'm not going to say like teenagers, like today's teenagers, but I think all teenagers, including myself when I was that age, you have trouble sometimes enunciating as it is. And so to add a layer of cloth on top of your mouth seems to be at cross purposes with theater. But
I'm trying to use it to my advantage because you should be articulating as strenuously as possible. So you have to actually double that enunciation and articulation and using all of your muscles in order to project. So when they do take off their masks, it will be so much easier. They'll be so primed and in such good shape for that.
No, yeah, it reminds me of like those not tongue twisters, but like tongue exercises people do, like, putting the cork in their mouth to, go through their lines so that when they take the cork out, it's so much easier to, have that enunciation and
Exactly.
articulation. Yeah. Well, that's great.
It's like in singing, you want to, if you have to hit a high note, hit notes higher than that. And then the high note becomes within your grasp.
Yeah.
Shoot for the moon. Shoot for the moon and you land in the stars, I always say.
Right. Now, you obviously got involved with theater and acting. It seemed like at an extremely young age. Where were you living? Where were you growing up as a kid?
So we grew up in Long Island, New York. Mm-hmm. So when I am in Long Island, this is the way I talk.
Okay, you can drop
embedded Long Island accent. Yeah, I'm from Long Island. My father was from Connecticut, and his father moved to Long Island. My father went to Chaminade High School on Long Island. I went to Hofstra University. And yes, my father and his brother always were enthralled with theater and acting. When we were very, very young, we watched On the Waterfront every single time it aired. My father and his brother would act out whole scenes from that movie. Wow. They knew it by heart. So it's just kind of like a family business that you grow up in. If you grew up in a family of dry cleaners or restaurant owners, It's the world you know. And that was normal for us, that my father and his brother would be putting on Anne of 1,000 Days at the local community theater or dinner theater. They were always doing theater, and we were enlisted as the No-Neck Monsters in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. We were fairies in The Tempest. Whenever they needed children, we were the snow children in Carousel. Anytime they needed kids, we were enlisted, and that was a normal life for us. That was completely normal to be in costumes and opening night parties, and we're talking small-scale, local community theater. My father created a company called Amityville Community Theater, or ACT.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they put on shows at the Amityville High School, which is where we lived at the time, and that was normal. That was I knew Come Back Little Sheba. My father directed Funny Girl. I made him audition me for Fanny Bryce because I was obsessed with the show. My sisters and I would act out all of the musical theater albums. We would make our families watch us act out all the songs. Jesus Christ Superstar we knew by heart. So that was normal life for us.
And so was that normal for like your dad growing up, or like what did his parents do? Like where did the spark get set for him? Because clearly, obviously, there's a lot of influences for you as a young kid, but because he was also in the military as a young man. So yes. where did this come into his life? Yeah.
He went to, like I mentioned, Chaminade, an old boys school, and he credits a guy who was the football coach and the drama.
Oh, okay. Wow.
The drama guy. So his name is Chris Sweeney, and he enlisted my dad. He needed guys for the drama department, and my dad, as a teenager, played Macbeth. Oh, wow. I have a picture of him on stage playing Macbeth, and he was jobbed in. The drama teacher needed more guys. Well, it was an old boys school, so he just needed more actors, and he got enlisted, and they did the Pyramid St. Thisbe scene from Midsummer, and they, we all do those Shakespeare competitions, and they won. And my father, up until the very end, would talk rapturously about Chris Sweeney and what he learned from him and how he ignited the flame. And his younger brother, Ed, went to Hofstra University. That's how I knew about the drama department. And we had an award-winning Shakespeare production with a replica of the Globe stage that was built every year. And so Hofstra was very on the map in terms of Shakespeare and studying Shakespeare. So when I went there, I played Bianca in Taming of the Shrew. But I can remember in the 4th grade, I went to a Catholic school up until 8th grade, and then an all-girl Catholic school, St. Joseph's, from 8th grade on. But I went to St. Martin of Tours school in Amityville, and I can remember in the 4th grade, we did a dumbed-down version of Midsummer, and I got cast as Helena, and the boy I was desperately in love with, Thomas Hogan, got cast as Demetrius. And I remember dancing the whole way home from the bus stop to my house. I mean, Because I think about this all the time, where was the flame lit? Where did all this get ignited?
Sure.
And I guess we are hardwired, but it is the world in which I lived comfortably. And my dad and my uncle just cared more about acting and theater and good actors than anything else. Even though they did jobs, that's where they found their solace and their respite, was doing these shows on the weekends and watching my father do Brick in Cat on Hutchin Roof, and then later Big Daddy. Yeah. I mean, that was just so normal for me. Anne of a Thousand Days, like I mentioned before, playing King Henry VIII, and really powerful, intense stuff for community theaters to put on. And he really made a name for himself. And there was the Watermelon Dinner Theater in Sayville, Long Island, and he did all the musicals there. Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Fiddler on the Roof. My father was an amazing Tevye for a big Irish guy. He was a great Tevye. And Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls, he did, name it, he did it.
Wow.
Directed and starred in, so.
And there are a lot of people that, just enjoy and love, doing community theater, and that's their outlet, and that's what they're excited about. And it seemed like, your dad had other ambitions or wanted to pursue it as a career, or wanted to make it, more of his focus. And of course, a lot of us, on the outside can look at, your dad's career trajectory, very differently than you can being there. So like as a kid, what was your perspective of what your dad was going through to try to, figure this out? And it sounded like, you had lived with your grandparents at a certain time, and like, were they fully behind this? Were they not at all behind,
Not at all. Not at all. After my father died, American Theater Magazine asked me to write something. And I started with the story. We were living with my grandparents because we couldn't afford to keep our own house in West Gilgo Beach. And we moved in with my grandparents, which for an 8th grader is sort of mortifying. And I remember, I'm trying to remember how he went from Long Island community theater and suddenly started doing regional theater, because I'm a little bit fuzzy about what happened first. But suddenly my dad was doing The Little Barber in Man of La Mancha at the Lambertville, New Jersey. It was a musical theater in a tent.
Okay.
And near Bucks County. And I would go with him every weekend, and we would drive into the city and pick up 2 flamenco dancers who played the horse, who played Don Quixote's horse. They were gorgeous. I didn't mind that at all. And drive to New Jersey. And I remember very clearly at the dining table saying to my dad, "Are we going to New Jersey this weekend?" And him kicking me under the table because he was not supposed to be doing theater. It was almost like he was a heroin addict. He could live with my grandparents and they would support us as long as he promised to swear off doing theater on the side and make an honest living. And he was pretending that he wasn't doing this, but he actually was. He was at the time working as a stockbroker during the day in the city with Martha Stewart, funnily enough, at a company called Moness Williams and Seidel. And he was a security guard at a motel at night, round the clock. My mother was working as a waitress, trying to keep our house that we lived in.
Wow.
And he was doing theater. He was mainlining theater on the weekends and, in secret. So it's really incredible because he had to do it. It was a need.
Right.
It was an important, vital priority in his life that he needed it like a drug. But it's pretty, it's pretty incredible when I think about it, because I thought about this a lot after he died. I had to go back to those beginning times, and somehow he was doing these regional theaters, amazing productions, really brilliant. Got involved in what they used to have is showcases, actual showcases where the Impossible Ragtime Theater would do lunchtime theater in pubs. He did the sea plays, the O'Neill sea plays. He did Julius Caesar and Ivanov with Jonathan Frakes.
Oh, well, yeah, from Star Trek, yeah.
Yes, so you would do these showcases in New York, daytime theater, lunchtime theater, the Impossible Ragtime Theater, and his agent, that's how he got an agent. Okay. Then I think what changed everything was he got cast as an understudy in Streamers by Mike Nichols at Lincoln Center.
Sure, okay.
And I think he may have actually ended up replacing somebody who left. And then Mike Nichols suggested him to somebody for Semi-Tough, the Burt Reynolds, Chris Christopherson movie. And that was it. That was when he took off.
Well, and so I know, like, and we jumped a lot of your years there, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go back and fill in a little bit of the gaps. I mean, how was the, I guess, struggle of him working at this career? How was that affecting you? Like, you know, like, were you aware of it? Was it, I mean, you know, of course we can all glamorize certain professions and like, oh, I'm sure it was just amazing, you know, for Brian Dennehy to be an actor. And, you know, and I'm sure his family always had great times, you know, but.
No, the downside was that we had terrible cars. We always had crappy cars that blew black smoke from the engine into the car, cars that had no floors. We always had terrible cars. I can remember our heat going off in the middle of the night because bills weren't paid. I can remember because where we lived was West Gilgo Beach, which is the hinterlands. It's like 5 miles east of Jones Beach. And, you know, like we lived like pioneers. And I remember having no phone for a while. And here's the thing. The downside was that. Yeah, the upside was my parents, very, very young. My mother was 19 when she had me. They knew that education was the most important thing. So they scrimped and saved and sacrificed to give us the best education their money could buy. So they put us in this all-girl Catholic school, St. Joseph's, the Academy of St. Joseph's in Brentwood. Amazing education. My sisters and I had a fantastic education. They knew that that was really important, even while all this craziness was going on. It was sort of like, I guess, the way families live if they have a circus performer, circus families. The romantic, you know, out of the trunk, all of that.
Right.
It was kind of fun, but it was also kind of harrowing because you never knew if your car was going to break down. Our cars broke down all the time. And because my father was away traveling a lot, my mother bore the brunt of it. Thank God it all paid off. But I do remember being aware of the fact that my father was following his dreams. And that was an admirable thing because my friends' fathers who just worked 9-to-5 jobs, every once in a while, a dad would say to me, like on a sleepover or is at somebody's house, how did your father do it? How did your father pursue his dreams no matter what? And what they were saying to me and what I heard was, how was he so brave? How did he not get sucked into the grind and the nose to the grindstone? They admired that. And every time a dad or a family member of my friends would say something to me, that would remind me that what he was doing was kind of cool, even though at the time we had no idea if it was going to pay off, it was going to succeed.
Right. I mean, you know, I'm assuming when you mentioned sleepovers, like these are dads talking about your dad before he's really quote unquote made it. You know, it's like he's just, you know, he's a workaday actor. Like he's just trying to find jobs and, you know, cobbling it together as he can. So it's not even, you know, millions of dollars coming in for, you know, it's none of that. It's just that he's pursuing something that he loves. You know, you mentioned his parents weren't totally thrilled with it, but it sounded like, you know, I mean, was your mom just fully behind his career, or where did she kind of fall in that? Cause like you said, she had to, there was 3 of you. There were 3 kids.
3 kids. I was the oldest. So she was 19 when she had me in Camp Lejeune. He was a Marine. And I think she just really loved him. And remember, they were so young. They were so young that you would just go, okay, whatever, this is what we're doing. You know, like if I was the age, you know, I got married at 33.
Yeah.
And my husband was an actor, but we both were working. Like we were working when we met each other. It's not like you're in your 40s and somebody's still trying to get something going. Like, you know, he was really rising. He was becoming more and more well known for his work. So it was a gamble. And thank God it paid off pretty early on. When Semi-Tough came out, I was 16. So I remember going to see it in the movie theater. I think we went on Thanksgiving Day and thinking, wow, he's acting with Burt Reynolds. And this is his first film role. And the movie kind of stops in his scenes. And after that, he just never stopped working. So I think she was just sort of in love with him. and supporting him and whatever. And it was fun. She stage managed some of the early shows, made costumes. But I remember she sewed his suitless costume for Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. You were young enough to be stupid enough to find it fun and not terrifying, I guess, is the key.
And of course, like, nowadays kids or young people are just introduced to so many options and so many things that, just 50 years ago, you weren't aware of all the things you could do and all the possibilities, or working online was not even a thing. That wasn't even a concept. So it's like, I mean, I'm not saying that all these people settled, but I think their worldview was probably just a lot narrower because of the reality, because of options.
Meanwhile, my sleepovers were at homes with pools, and the men who were saying this to me were often worked for the phone company, were CEOs and had made a lot of money. It was clear why they chose the path they chose.
Sure.
But I think a little part of anybody really goes, what if? I wonder, what was the thing I dreamed of being when I was a little boy? And when did that go away? And when did it become insurance salesman, or maybe the job was something that you wanted to do? My brother-in-law was an engineering major in school, worked for a company that sold ball bearings, decided he hated it, and went back to law school. So, and is now a lawyer. I mean, it's never too late to change, but I think that it was clear why you chose something that you knew you were going to. It's hard to do something when you don't know if you're going to succeed at it. That's scary. It's really scary.
Yeah. My fiance, my partner, she's a physician, and we've had a lot of conversations of just like, that's a very linear path. You do this thing and then you do this thing. And as long as you show up day after day, you're going to get to, be a real live physician. You're going to do that thing. You're going to be at the pinnacle. You're going to be at the top. And a creative pursuit is just so different. And there's no guarantee that you're going to arrive at the top.
I know so many wonderful, wonderful actors who have never worked professionally, never even gotten an agent. Yeah. I can't think of another field where you can actually be the best at what you do and nobody knows or cares. Right. It's heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking profession.
And I mean, it just brings up this concept of success. Well, what does success mean? Because if we're all basing it on, well, how many credits do you have, or how much money do you have, or, or how much you're getting for different roles and things like that, then yes, I mean, it's very easy to fall short. And I'm guilty of this same stuff too. And I do want to kind of get into that more, but I before I lose the thread of it, as a kid, were you interested in anything else, like through school? Were there other pursuits or things you saw yourself doing, or you thought of doing, or were you really interested in, or it was just, I mean, it's kind of funny, like even with the challenges and I'm sure some of the stress of living with your grandparents, like what that was like, even with all that, you were like, yeah, I want to do this too. I mean, was it very clear like that for you?
I never wanted to do anything else, but I remember my father would always say, if you can do something else, do it. That's a common thing to hear.
Of course.
He also would say to me, it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. So make sure it's what you absolutely want to do. And when I heard him say that, I thought, he means the work is hard. Well, I love the work. It doesn't feel like work to me.
Of course.
I never knew that he was talking about collecting unemployment, going on hundreds of auditions, being told no over and over again. And I was a long time into it before I realized that's what he meant. I remember auditioning. I think I auditioned 14 times for the movie JFK for Oliver Stone. Yeah. And in New York, I auditioned for him. I don't think it was before you could put yourself on tape. So we didn't do that. It was in person 14 times to be one of Kevin Costner's legal team, the legal team. Yep, and my uncle, my father's other brother, Uncle Mike, was an FBI agent. I read the Christopher Report. I talked to him about exactly what went on. This is all the preparation I did. Because he was an FBI agent during the time of the assassination. So all the prep work that I went in, so that when I went in and met Oliver Stone, it really knew what I was talking about. And I remember saying to myself, if I don't get this, I quit. I quit the business. Well, you know who he cast instead of me?
Who was that?
Laurie Metcalf. Okay. Only one of the greatest actors to draw breath. So I thought, okay, well, I can keep going a little bit longer. If I'm neck and neck with Laurie Metcalf, I think I could. So my husband and I always laugh. It's like, we've had enough success to keep going, but not enough to keep going. But yeah, no, I've always loved it. I do think now a missed calling for me, I would have been an amazing casting director. I remember every face and every name that goes with that face of everything I've ever seen. I'll be watching a movie. I'm like, oh, I know that person. I can totally trace their career. It's a party trick. It's just a superpower, and it's crazy. It's a crazy.
Yeah, I'm often called a savant because they're like, how do you remember that this guy was in this movie 30 years? And it's like, well, how do you not remember? It's like such a memorable scene.
Yeah, it's like spelling. I can't not spell something correctly. I just, and people will send me stuff and I'm like, well, do you want me to tell you about the 10 typos? I mean, it's really annoying. So that's a superpower of like I cannot spell something incorrectly. It's pretty annoying. But yeah, casting director, I would have been good at, but I'm too old to start at the bottom getting coffee for people. So.
Well, now you just you have to put yourself out there as like, I'm starting with this level of project. This is what I'm doing. And
what I do is at LACSA, at the school where I teach, the cinematic arts department, they know to call me if they need help finding an actor.
Oh, cool.
And well, yeah. I enjoy doing that.
Well,
I'll be like, well, have you thought about going this way? And I really love doing that. It's really fun.
That's cool. Well, yeah, I mean, it is exciting. And in the little bit I've done, through the workshops, or whatever, quote unquote, casting people, it is fun to put people in maybe different places or things that they haven't done before. And you get to see other people see something, or you get to see them, the actor themselves discover something through playing a different character. It is, very rewarding when that lines up well.
Yeah, it's like matchmaking. It's really fun.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned going to Hofstra, and so what was the, how did you end up at that college? I mean, had you applied to a number of other ones? Did you know what you wanted to do going into it?
I think back on that experience and I was asleep at the wheel. I remember my mother drove that train. I left high school, I was artistic, but I wasn't that ambitious. My mother went to Hofstra and my uncle went to Hofstra, and because they had a really good theater program, it sort of made sense for a lot of reasons. But I actually, to my mother's credit, I could have commuted, but she really wanted me to have the living at college, halfway house to adulthood. So I was in the dorms, but it was nice also having my family nearby. And then for many, many reasons, after Hofstra, I didn't feel quite ready to go out into the wild world. And it may have been because I was at an all-girl Catholic high school. So it was going from a pretty sheltered fairy tale kind of like Hogwarts type all-female experience that was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful school with an amazing education, and then to a public, large, huge university. I didn't feel quite ready. So I was very lucky and got accepted into LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, for the 1-year program. I was a D there and got to it was first time in Europe, live in London for a year. I made lifelong friends at high school and college. And my LAMDA friends are so dear to me. It was an amazing year of seeing, doing school, fight, stage combat, Shakespeare, everything, the works, and then running into the city to see a play a night as much as we could. Back then in 82, you could see, I remember sitting on the stage at the National Theater for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream for £5 on a cushion. Paul Scofield played Oberon.
Okay.
He was leaping and running over us. I saw Imelda Staunton, Bob Hoskins, and Ian Charleston do Guys and Dolls. Ian McKellen was in so much. I saw Derek Jacobi do, on a different night, Peer Gynt, Cyrano de Bergerac, Prospero in the Tempest.
Okay.
And Mark Rylance was a 19-year-old Ariel. I had no idea.
Wow.
That, true repertory.
Sure. I can't imagine having all those plays in your head at one time.
Oh my God, I know. So that was immersive and an immersion into the life of a classical actor. And I loved going to London. And then after London, didn't quite know what to do, was living on Long Island with my mom. I was married at the time to somebody who I'd met at Lambda. He was living with me. And we started going into the city. There's this amazing director, David Kaplan, New York based, who was a teacher, an incredible acting teacher. And so a lot of our alums, Tom McGowan has a flourishing, thriving career. And he was,
lots of other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so he was the first one to turn everybody onto David Kaplan. We all became acolytes and disciples and going into the city. And I got cast as one of the non-equity ensemble in the New York Shakespeare Festival, Kevin Kline, Henry V, with Mary Elizabeth Master Antonio. So after first job after school, I was like, okay, this is the way my life is going to be. Got cast right away.
And you bring up that production, and I also noticed you were in a Cyrano de Bergerac. Was it at Williamstown? And before that, in 1980?
While I was in college, my girlfriend Diana and I became apprentices at Williamstown in 1980. And all the apprentices went to an audition in front of Nikos Sakaropoulos, and they cast the ensemble. Right. And I was lucky enough to get cast in Frank Langella's Cyrano. Yeah. You did your research. Oh, yeah. So that was one summer while I was in college. The next summer I did Shakespeare Company. I was an apprentice at Shakespeare Company when Hamish was a toddler, and Kristen Linklater was Mariah in Twelfth Night.
Well, and that's when you first met Jamie Newcomb? Is that when you first crossed paths with Jamie?
Exactly. Jamie was in it As You Like It, and I believe Twelfth Night as well. Yeah, he played Fabian in Twelfth Night. Oh. So my dad was really smart. He was like, okay, if you want to be an actor, you're going to do this. And Williamstown was boot camp. We would strike a set in one night and put up the next set in one night. Wow. We were basically, unpaid.
Yeah, exactly. You were slaves. You were indentured servants. Yeah.
We were totally indentured servants, but I loved it. I loved it. I couldn't get enough. And I got to watch rehearsals, Frank Langella rehearsed Cyrano.
And were these programs both that you just, was it like paper applications? I mean, was it just that kind of process, or were there, just to get involved? Was that?
It must have been paper. You must have, I think back in those days, you would pick up your rotary phone, call a theater, say, I'm interested in your indentured servant program. They would mail you an application. You would fill it out, and you would snail mail it back. And I don't know. My dad must have, at this point, he was working professionally, and he must have heard about it through the grapevine.
Sure.
And thought it was what should I do with my kid who's interested in theater, and where's a good place to start? And Kate Burton was there. Jeannie Hackett, may she rest in peace. Yeah. I made some really good friends there that are still friends to this day. Incredible connections. And
it sounds like, even though, any parent would use whatever they could to, further, or most parents would use what they could to aid their child. It sounds like your dad wasn't just like calling up Williamstown going, hey, you gotta take my daughter and bring her into the program. It sounds like you were trying to do this of your own merit and your own way in some regard.
How do you find out about this stuff though? Like, I'm trying to imagine life without the internet. Seriously. Like, I know. So difficult. And then Shakespeare and Company was an amazing experience. Also really grueling, really exhausting. Classes all day. And then I played Audrey in As You Like It and Jamie was in that.
So watching, I mean, and a lot of the people you mentioned were very serious big names at the time too. Langella and Kate Burton and David Hyde Pierce was in that Cyrano, Eric LaSalle and Anthony Heald in the Henry V he did a little bit later. So, I mean, do you feel like there were probably many different things. And of course, you mentioned all those actors in London you saw, but did you feel like you were starting to, build what you would consider now your process? Or were there certain things that you remember taking away from those shows or those rehearsals that you're like, kind of like what we've been doing a little bit in the workshops, where it's like you get to see somebody who's doing this regularly, and it's like, even more than just watching your dad in a film or on TV, it's like now you're getting to see like, oh, this is the work that's going on behind all of this.
I think probably I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I say this to my kids all the time. When I was a student, I hated vocal exercises, hated them, hated theater games, hated it with a passion. And then I remember I had an audition for Independent Shakespeare Company in LA.
Yep.
You had to do a monologue. And I remember working on the monologue because I wanted to put myself in my kids' shoes. And all of a sudden I realized the penny dropped. It took a long time. And sometimes it takes a long time. The penny dropped where I went, oh my gosh, I can make my voice do whatever I want it to do. That's why we did all those games, curling up and down your spine, relaxing your vertebrae, breathing from your diaphragm. That's what it took me. I didn't get it. I was very slow to learn. I would say that looking back on that time, what I saw people doing from Franklin Jalla, Tony Heald, Kevin Kline, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, amazing performers, was doing things with the words, acting with the words, actively pursuing your goal with the words. That it was nobody just stood in one place and declaimed and spoke descriptively about their feelings.
Right.
I never saw that. If you did see that, it really stood out. It was, and also with my father would say to anybody who stood still long enough, you serve the playwright, you serve the story. If it's not moving the story forward, get out of your way. It's not about you. Nobody cares about your feelings. They paid $100 for their ticket. It's about their experience. So very, very active, propelling the story forward and moving things along actively. I definitely would say that was drummed into my head just from all my exposure to seeing people rehearse and performances that I've loved.
Right. I mean, that there's this, and this is a word that comes up a lot in rehearsals, that there's an urgency, that there's a need that is not being met. And what are you doing to try to get it? And that doesn't mean you're always at a breakneck pace, but you are always, as the character, very conscious of what you want. And so you might try different tactics and different paces to get it, but that makes a lot of sense. And
I say to my kids all the time, don't mistake casualness for naturalness. So young people think that the more flip they are, the more nonchalant and, with the hip jutting out and hand in a pocket. Well, if you don't care, why should we care?
Right.
It should be life and death. It should be life and death, and there needs to be an urgency. You have to achieve this goal. I think the biggest mistake people make is playing their given circumstances instead of the character's given circumstances. Nick Bottom is not trying to do a funny death scene. He thinks he's going to blow your mind with his tragedy. He thinks it's going to be the most heartbreaking death scene in the world. If you're trying to be funny, as Nick Bottom, that's the actor's given circumstances bleeding through. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that Brando had such an impact on your dad and of the same period, Montgomery Clift or James Dean. And while you could look at them and be like, wow, look at how relaxed they were anything but relaxed. Like they weren't, James Dean was like just this smoldering fire. Like he was never casual. Like, and Brando, the same thing. It's like there was always so much thought. I was just actually watching an interview with Mark Rylance, who was from a number of years ago, and he loves Brando as Mark Antony. And he said, just like, because you feel like he's so present with what he's saying. That's what actors are always trying to get to, that place where it's like every time you say it, it sounds like it's the first time you've said it. It's the first time it's occurred to you, whether it's a play or a movie. So yeah, having those two amazing shows, so you're involved with Williamstown, you're involved with Shakespeare and Company, then you get the New York Shakespeare Festival, and then the rest of your career is set, right? Like you skyrocket to fame and fortune. So what happens after Henry V?
After Henry V, we moved into the city, and I was signed with the Susan Smith Agency, and I started going out on auditions, and I became the queen of the $1 Million Minute. I did a lot of commercials, made a good living. Commercials bought me my home. I have nothing bad to say about doing commercials, and you learn. It's a great way to learn camera skills. And I got on The Guiding Light, which was a soap opera. And again, huge learning curve, because you're, I don't know how they do them now, but at the time you're creating an hour of filmed product a day, which is insane and impossible. So they have 3 cameras and the director calls camera A, camera B, camera C. So while you're filming, the editing is happening.
Right.
And you have to be aware of which camera is on your face and turning out, making sure that the light is hitting you and no movement. That was the hardest thing for me to learn being theater trained. With they didn't have time to move the cameras. If you were to suddenly move and go get a drink from the cabinet, they didn't have time for that. So you had to really stand still and the cameras do all the moving for you. That was so hard for me. I can remember pressing my leg against the foot of a couch just to release that tension of the impulse to move. I had to curl my toes sometimes to just keep myself planted and speak the lines. And I would have to learn 40 pages a night.
Good Lord.
That was another important skill. And that was also an introduction. There's another skill that really stands you well if you are on a TV series where you're an ongoing thing, which is playing a 3-dimensional character where 1 week you're in love with the guy and the next week you're trying to kill him.
Right.
So to be able to play 3-dimensionally and like plant the seeds of, is she a good girl or is she a bad girl? You know, having a little bit of 360 degrees of this could be possibly anything and lead to everything, and putting in little Easter eggs of, oh, I remember when, then people can call back and go, yeah, but she had that shifty-eyed little thing. So if you're playing an ongoing character, the writers can see something and go, oh, I loved when she did that thing. Let's start writing for her. I think if you watch Succession, I think you could see it was so exciting when the writers started writing for the actors.
Oh, the show on HBO, right? Yeah.
It's such a brilliant show. And everybody sounds different. They all have their own voice because I think the writers started letting the actors do their thing. It's very exciting. So anyway, the soap opera taught me, I learned a lot from the people who came before. Like, we could be having this horrible fight scene and they were like, but we need to show that there's some heat behind it because they could have us in bed together next week.
Okay. So just always conscious of, the multiple layers going on with that. Well, anyone who's been in a relationship, it's like you can love someone and want to strangle them at the same time. It's like, that exists.
I talk about this with my kids all the time. In Shakespeare, I actually feel sorry for Richard III. I feel sorry for Aaron. And they're horrified. They're like, you feel sorry for Aaron? And I'm like, he's been enslaved. Now he's a prisoner. He's ostracized and pushed aside. And now he has this child. Yes. If you don't feel all those feelings about all the characters, it's a long 3 hours in the theater.
Right. And yeah, I mean, and of course, like, it's a little related to what you're saying about Nick Bonham. It's like, if you're playing Richard III, I mean, maybe there's some level of the, you can consider the consciousness of like, does he feel sorry for himself or whatever? But, eventually, you're trying to put yourself in those given circumstances of what was it like for this character to grow up this way and and to feel the hatred or the dismissal or whatever it is. And you can pick any character you want. I think Richard III is a not easy one to talk about, but there's a lot to talk about in terms of the psychological makeup of that particular character. I was curious where and how you got involved with Tony and Tina's wedding.
Okay, so Tony and Tina's,
came between like what, Henry V and Guiding Light, somewhere in there?
Oh, no, it was way after Guiding Light.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. No, I was on the Guiding Light at the same time. What am I saying? So after I got on the Guiding Light, Tony and Tina's wedding was a cross between our Hofstra friends and our David Kaplan friends. So all the Hofstra people, Nancy Casaro, my girlfriend Elizabeth Herring, who I brought in from Lambda, including James Altuner, Lambda friends. We started taking class with David Kaplan, putting on all these amazing shows like Jean Genet's The Screens in an Abandoned Supermarket, doing like kind of immersive guerrilla style theater that was kind of like the 80s in New York where you could do that kind of thing. And Nancy and Mark Nasser, who are friends of mine from college, used to riff on these characters they created, Tony and Tina. Tina, get in here, where's my dinner, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And they had this idea. I think it was Mark Nasser said, what if I wonder if it would work if you did Tony and Tina Gets Married and the audience are the guests at the wedding. And then we started having meetings and talking about how to make that work. And I was in the very early meetings, and like Jack Friss, who is a dear friend of mine, we had meetings at his apartment talking about all the different things we could do and came up with the character's name. So my name, I came up with the name Donna Marsala. I named my boyfriend Wally Fabrizio, was a good friend of mine from high school. So Dominic Fabrizio, stealing names that just made us laugh.
Yeah.
And I remember going to a wedding where one of the bridesmaids sang at the reception. And when she was hit a high note, she ripped the choker off her neck. And I thought that was so funny. I also, one of my jobs on Long Island was I worked at a tuxedo rental place. So I had tons of stories about things that had gone wrong at weddings.
Wow.
And we just started improvising and we started talking about how we could make this work. And our first show was in a loft downtown, and the people who came to see it loved it. And it just grew and grew and grew until we were doing it at Carmelita's Reception House on 13th and 3rd. And People magazine came, and that was it. It became a massive hit. You couldn't get tickets.
Wow. And did you feel like you had a strong improv background going into that? I mean, was that something that you wanted to do? You wanted to pursue? You were excited about that? Because that's a very specific world within acting, doing improv or sketch comedy or things like that. I mean,
never. I never had any interest in it. Here's the thing. And I am totally not schooled in improv, never taken a Viola Spolin workshop or class or anything. So all I know is, always say yes, don't say no. And we didn't even do workshops with like the improv rules or anything. I've never thought of myself as a funny person. And again, playing the given circumstances. Donna Marsala doesn't think she's funny when she goes up to somebody and says, so who's sexier, Madonna or Marilyn Monroe? I wasn't trying to be funny, but people would find that very funny, going up and having the conversation. If you told me I had to be funny, I would be paralyzed. But I was just embodying this character of like, I work at the Barefoot Peddler, and I was the Madonna wannabe. This was in the 80s. So I had the black rubber bracelets up my arm and like high-heeled shoes, and I'm copying her makeup. And Dominic and I've had the time of my life. We learned the whole dance at the wedding reception. We did the dance with the lift and everything.
Oh, wow.
But I wasn't trying to be funny. I was being Donna Marsala. Totally obsessed with Madonna. And, the improvs would just come out of being really...
Was any art, imitating life, or were you, Elizabeth, totally obsessed with Madonna at all, or was that...
I love Madonna, but I was definitely not a Madonna wannabe.
Okay, you're not as obsessed as...
No. But I just thought that it was just so perfect. Like we in the show, we did this dance lip sync thing. Oh, okay. And that was very funny because that number changed through the years. When we first did the show, Tina and her girlfriends, we won a lip sync contest. And so we, at the wedding reception, we did Love is a Battlefield, Pat Benatar.
Yep.
But Donna takes her talent very, very seriously. I sang with the band. Oh my gosh. I think we sang that song, Love will lift us up where we belong. Song. And the songs would change as the decades went on. We did this show for a long, long time. I always closed at the end of the show, I said, I'm Donna and I want to sing Tina's favorite song, Desperado. We always close with Desperado. So it was a blast. It was a lot of fun putting on a show with your friends. And then when it became a smash hit, it was just like crazy time.
And so,
but I was doing the soap opera during the day. I would get up at 5 a.m, go to work, shoot all day, and then race in a cab down to the theater, change my clothes, and then I'd have to go a little bit after the show and learn 40 pages. It was insanity.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy time. You could only do it when you're in your 20s.
And were you thinking about, okay, this is the direction? I mean, because, by this point, your dad is doing more and more film, really establishing himself, as a name actor and someone that people are starting to recognize, and probably even a household name to some degree at that point. Were you conscious of, this is the direction I want my career to go in, this is what I want to do? Or were you just was it just get up and do the next thing and try not to fall down and that kind of thing?
I have to say, looking, I have a different perspective looking back. When I was in it, it was, no disrespect to Tony and Tina's wedding, but it was exhausting, hard work for very little money.
Yeah.
And I desperately, every time we did a new iteration of it, it's like, why am I not on Broadway so that I can say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available. Like I desperately wanted a film career or to be doing really important, legit theater so that I wasn't free and able to do Tony and Tina's wedding. It just didn't work out that way because it was really exhausting. It was exhausting. And then when the guiding light ended, I went up to the Jiva Theater and did a play. It was written by Gerson Kanan. I did that play. And then Tony and Tina's wedding was moving to LA. So I literally packed a car, drove to Rochester, New York, and then got on a plane from New York and flew to LA with a bicycle and everything I owned.
Wow.
All the suitcases filled with everything. And I landed in LA a day before our first preview. I remember I must have had a Walkman. Walkmans must have been invented because the new song was Cold Hearted Snake at that point, and I was trying to memorize that song. And of course, I had to learn the dance when I got to LA. So that was my move to LA.
And Did you get, were there agents pursuing you guys as a result of the play, or did you start, your introduction to LA, were you making inroads yourself, or how was that all coming together?
I still was with Susan Smith, so I was with Susan Smith in LA.
So she had two offices there.
An LA office and a New York office. So my agents all came to see Tony Tin's wedding. And I will say this, our contract was for 4 months, and the minute the contract was up, I was done. It was, because being a bridesmaid, we danced in very high heels for 3 hours. Yeah. It was a lot, but it was so thrilling to do it in LA because when we opened, we were a very highly anticipated hit. And I remember opening night, Kirk Douglas was there, Rod Steiger was there, the stars that came to see that show, and groupies. Zelda Rubinstein was a groupie. Frankie Valli and Harry Anderson were groupies. They came repeatedly to the show. Wow. But my biggest thrill, the biggest one, I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even go near her because I was paralyzed, was Faye Dunaway. So remember, in the 80s, Faye Dunaway was a god to me, and she was there, and I got goosebumps just thinking about what a thrill it was for her to be in the audience. I adored and worshipped her.
So what I'm curious about is how you started to get work in LA.
So I started auditioning in LA, and one of the first jobs I got, again, I've always had the same story happen over and over again. So I got casted South Coast rep and became friends with Barbara Dowling, who was also in the show, who was married at the time to Colin Meaney.
Oh, okay.
And Colin Meaney was really good friends with James Lancaster, who did Rat in the Skull with my dad in Chicago. I was divorced at the time. James came down to the opening night of this David Hare play, and he's my husband now.
Oh, okay.
My husband did a play with my father, Rat in the Skull, in Chicago at the Wisdom Bridge in 1985. And now that's who I'm married to. So I did that play. I just wanted to fill in that. I did the play down the South Coast. And then while I was doing that play, Colin Meaney was doing Deep Space Nine. And in the play was an actor called Simon Templeman, whose wife, Rosalind Chow, just got cast as Colin's wife on Deep Space Nine. Then after Secret Rapture, I got cast on Best of Both Worlds, the Star Trek Next Generation.
Oh, okay.
So it's about 28 and went in to audition for this sci-fi show and got cast in this 2-parter. And here I am 30 years later, and I'm about to fly to London for a Star Trek convention. It's just crazy.
Well, that's great.
Completely insane.
Well, it's great that you had such a good experience with Star Trek, and it keeps going. So you're in LA, you're doing Star Trek, and again, were you just starting to go out more regularly? Because it seemed like you also made a bit of a shift, at least from a resume perspective, from doing theater to doing, focusing on TV and film, and that became, more of what you were focused on. And was that just Was that a conscious
Yeah.
decision or just a
No,
natural progression?
The LA theater scene is so different from the New York theater scene.
Yeah.
But what I had in New York was a group of friends, a band of brothers, a company that I belonged to. And what I found out when I got to LA is I can remember Antias starting up and being formed around that time. And I can't remember if I had an opportunity to join them or not. But I think that I'm witnessing my son go through this right now, who is a 24-year-old actor. And the agents, I feel like his agents want to send him out for TV and film because they think he's going to be, you know, a star, you know, which is a really valid reason. But also, let's be honest, it makes them more money. So they're not sending him out for many theater auditions. And he also has done quite a bit of Shakespeare in the Park, that kind of thing. Independent Shakespeare Company. He's done 3 seasons with them. And he misses it and he wants it. So I think he wants to get a few credits under his belt and a few, you know, good, healthy paychecks. And then he will probably be able to say to them, look, I'm taking summer off and I want to go to Utah or I want to go to Oregon. I want to get back to it because he misses it. So it's really hard to know when you're in it. Like, is he the next Timothy Chalamet? Who knows? Until you throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. So he's at that stage right now, and I can see. So when I came out here, I did get a few theater auditions, but it was like, I'm 28, which is old for starting things in LA for a female. Let's be honest. Let's see what sticks. And I got lots of little pieces in TV shows, still making a ton of commercials, which is, I probably made a national commercial a month, which was great money. Yeah. I was queen of the $1 million.
What were you attributing that to? Like, I mean, did you just like, did you feel like you locked in on like, all right, I know I know this medium, I know how it works. Like, or do you, I mean, there's always some sense of, you know, right place, right time, right look. But did you just, I mean, how do you explain doing?
What would happen is certain directors would say, I love you. So I had a wonderful relationship with a director called Leslie Decter, who would bring me in before the clients. The clients make the decision, but he championed me. And
we're shortlisted. I mean, really. I mean, you know, that, which was great. I mean, I mean, but it comes from, you know, your work ethic, your personality, the relationship that, you know, I mean, that you're a professional, that they like working with you.
I think that in commercials, if you think of yourself making a 1-minute movie, the look is really, really important, probably more important than the acting. But if you have the right look and you can act and really serve the material and make people believe this is really happening, then it depends on the director and the client if they value that. You have to do the same thing. You do more takes making a commercial than I've ever done making a film or a TV show. So after the 75th time of you biting into a meatball, and if you can make that seem like it's the first time, that's gold. You know, it's really hard to do. I remember being on a commercial for a car rental company, and we were driving out in Joshua Tree, and the guy who was my husband was not a professional actor, and the director getting very frustrated with him because he kept saying, we need to see it in your eyes. And the actor turned to me in desperation and said, I don't know, how do I do that? And I said to him, we're on vacation. We have young children. We're in the desert. The sun is setting. You need to fill your body from the tip of your toes to the top of your head with golden, radiant beams of joy and happiness and content, and make them shoot out your eyeballs. I can't explain it any other way. And he looked at me like I was insane. And I said, you have to look like there's nowhere else on earth you'd rather be than here in this moment. And you have to do it 180 times.
Wow.
And so it's sort of trying to explain how to parallel park or how to breathe. That is another superpower. I can parallel park on the head of a pin.
I was going to say, you're good at breathing, Elizabeth. That's good to know.
Yeah, got the breathing down. But my sons are like, how did you park in that space? I cannot break down the steps for you. I just have an innate sense of how to parallel park. And if you don't know how to shoot beams of golden joy out of your eyeballs, maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's not the business for you. I don't know how to explain it any other way. And he looked at me like I was insane. But I said, I think that's what the director wants from you, is that you could die right now and you will have lived a fulfilling, happy, joy-filled life.
All right. Now, do you feel like the director got what he needed on that day, or
he probably just,
it's close enough.
Cut his losses. Exactly.
So from when you were in New York, like after college, I mean, did you have any other day jobs, or were you pretty much supporting yourself off commercials?
Oh my gosh, that's a wonderful question. When I was in school, I told you I worked for a tuxedo rental place. I worked for a Raider company. Okay. My father wanted me to work. He wanted me to have a work ethic and not just assume that he was going to be paying for everything. And I think it was really helpful and important that my sisters and I supported ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so in New York, I worked at a restaurant. I waited on tables. I worked at a restaurant called TJ Tucker's in New York City. I made a lot of good friends there, and it was owned by Tommy O'Neill and Tucker Fredrickson. It was a sports bar. It was the perfect place for me because I don't know or care anything about sports ball. So when I would be there and Bubba Smith would come in, or Dick Stockton, or these coaches, the guys who owned the Giants, I didn't care. I didn't know who they were. It meant nothing to me. Keith Hernandez was a regular and saw me Big hug. They were really, really nice. I was the one saying, the Oscars are on. Can we turn off the game and can we put the Tonys on? That was me. But I made a lot of friends there, and that was a fun job. But yeah, so I've got to say, I worked day jobs up until I did the soap opera, and then I didn't have time for that anymore. And so I've been supporting myself solely as an actress. 6 years ago, I started teaching at Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. That's only 2 days a week, and that's a labor of love. It definitely isn't for the money.
Sure. As most teachers, right? Yeah.
Exactly. My husband and I will say, if any aspiring actors are out there listening, we've been very, very lucky, but we're very smart with our money. We made a lot of money on commercials, and we sucked it away, and we saved all our money. And we've had actor strikes where friends of ours have lost their homes. Yeah. And we're very, very, very frugal. We live very frugally. We spend money on travel. Travel is something that we care a lot about. My husband's from Ireland, so going back to Europe every year to visit family was what we saved up for. And also we saved for college. We wanted our kids to have an amazing education. And so I never ever buy Starbucks or Jamba Juice. We don't fritter our money away. Ask anybody who knows us. We never even had babysitters. we were in a babysitting co-op. He does the pool care. We don't have gardeners. We don't have cleaning people, obviously. We are very, very flinty with our money, and it paid off, because we're comfortable, and so I've not had to work a day job for the money since, I would say, the mid-'80s. Well, so very blessed.
That is really, fortunate, that your career has afforded that. I also wonder, in terms of the lifestyle, how much of your early years, seeing your dad struggle, and like you said, the heat being turned off and all this kind of stuff, that I'm not going to project that, you come from a poverty mentality, but I think those kinds of circumstances do have an impact on people of like, what it's like to go without, and those things. So,
what's interesting is that is true. My husband has taken frugality to an art level. Like he did grow up on a farm where everything was reused and reused and reused until it was unusable. Wow. And he definitely comes from his mother, who's 95, went through the war. Definitely. He tells the story about his mom made all the sweaters, knitted all the sweaters. And there were 4 kids. Wow. And his father would come downstairs in a new sweater, but James would recognize the colors, because when they outgrew the sweaters, she would unravel them, tie them all together, and knit new sweaters.
Holy cow.
Reusing the yarn. So he comes from that war mentality, and I do too, but even more so than that, I think I can say this right now without offending anybody. When my father did start making money, he was throwing it around, throwing it around. It was 4-star everything, cars to the airport, everything. And in case anybody's wondering, no, there was nothing left. He lived life to the hilt, and he enjoyed it and was incredibly generous, but spent it like it was a contest. And I think from watching that and the massive, I've had my credit card taken away and cut in half. That was his card. And that's humiliating. And so from watching him spend like a crazy person, we both were like, you never know if you're ever going to work again. So and we wanted our kids to be able to go to college. We put 2 kids through college, one, their dream schools, DePaul Theater School and NYU Film School. And we have no loans. And, we saved every single penny so that we would be able to do that. And we finished that. Yeah. They're very, very proud about that. Yeah. Very proud.
And I think I remember reading this, like, did you have any sense at the time of how lucky your dad was? As a kid, when he first got started, I mean, like, when did it like really drop for you that you're like, oh my God, my dad was so lucky, like that, how long did that take?
I think at the time when we were living through it, like, for instance, this is crazy for me to remember. His agent had to talk him into taking the role in 10.
Oh, wow.
He was 36 when he did 10. And so I must have been, if I was 16 when Semi-Tough came out, and that was like probably his next film. So Semi-Tough, after Semi-Tough, he never stopped working. After 10, he was receiving offers only. He didn't have to audition for films anymore because that was a standout role. He was the eye of the storm. All the crazy farce swirling around him. So at the time, we all felt that he was getting what he deserved, that he was really, really good. And, it was understandable that he should be recognized, that he should be working. I don't think we realized, my God, he was lucky until much later. I think it's so hard to separate hindsight from when you realize something in the moment.
Sure.
I think that when he was able to do theater at the Goodman, like do his plays at the Goodman, and had an agent who allowed him to do that, to take the time off to make the way less money and come back to a thriving film career, I think that was, wow, this doesn't grow on trees. Somebody who's able to do anything he wants to do theater in Stratford, to go to Broadway, but still be able to do film roles. I think it was much later where we realized that's not common. A lot of people dream of having a career like that he actually has.
Yeah. Well, and even success in any one of those mediums, whether it's theater or film or, doing that kind of stuff. But it's certainly, like you said, having that choice. And I know, in the later 90s, as he started doing more theater, he won a couple Tony Awards. I remember watching the filmed version of Death of a Salesman. I remember like seeing that on a Sunday afternoon, and like that was the time where like you would just, I think I could TiVo it, but basically you're just clearing your day. You're like, all right, I'm going to watch this. And it was great. It was, I didn't want to watch anything else for those 3 hours. It was just like, this is great. Because you realize just how, like at that time, how special it was to be able to see a theater production that you weren't able to attend live, that could go from somewhere else. But I was just wondering, like, did you ever, obviously you and your dad would have totally different careers. Did you ever feel in his shadow? Did you ever want what he wanted, what he had? I mean, were you kind of expecting or hoping that your career would follow a similar trajectory?
Yes, of course. I, pined for that. That was the original plan. But I'm going to tell you something. Everything changed when I had my children.
Really?
So I did things in the reverse. He had his kids really, really young. He was 21 when I was born. So he had to catch up with his own life. Came out to LA, made all new friends, a whole new life, a new wife, everything. I did the reverse. I kind of worked, and when you're a girl, obviously you have a certain window during which you could have children. So in 1993, I got married when I was 32 and then immediately started trying to have children. And I remember very clearly having a conversation with my father. We were having lunch in LA at the Ivy, as one does. And my children were little babies. So I had two boys, 2 years apart. And I said to him, I think it must be a very Catholic thing where you just kind of go, God, I'm going to make a deal with you. Let my children be happy and outlive me, and I don't care if I ever work again. And I told my dad that. I said, I don't care if I ever work again. I kind of lost my ambition. All I wanted to do was be at home and watch them grow. And I think because I was older, I knew that it was going to go in the blink of an eye, and I didn't want to miss anything. I became completely hands-on mom. I was the president of every fundraising organization at their schools.
Oh, wow.
And I remember when they were in elementary school thinking, I'm just going to give away all my plays. All that's over. And my agents would send me in for things. And the greatest thing is that I thought, well, this is going to be the end of commercials. I never worked more. When I was pregnant, using my pregnant belly for commercials, sonogram, doctors, insurance, pregnant. Well, I remember being a pregnant mom in a tornado. My house, they had wrecked a house, and it was for Allstate, and we had a tornado, and I was days away from giving birth. I worked more when I was pregnant, and then the kids worked. We made a lot of money, and I meant that I could be with them and I didn't have to be away. But I said that to my dad. I said, I don't care if I ever work again. And he looked at me and he said, I envy you. And so that's, we talk about how proud I was of him, how he was living the dream. But the downside is that, he didn't spend as much time with us as he would have liked. And he talked about that in his later years. He regretted not being with us more, the graduations missed, the christenings, the plays that we were in, the school shows, all that kind of thing. He missed out on a lot. And I remember him saying at one point, I don't even know when your birthdays are. And I was like, yeah, you might not want to tell us that, he just he was wired differently. Sure. When I had my kids, that became it for me. And I remember being president of fundraising at the school and using my acting powers I could get up and speak passionately and clearly and eloquently about my cause and giving to the school and supporting your kids. And so I felt, this is what I'm going to do now for the rest of my life, using my skills in order to speak well in front of people. And, I think it was 20 years before I did Cyrano at ISC, and I was like, oh my God, I need glasses. What do? I have to get contact lenses? I mean, just being 20 years went by, and my husband and I thought, we don't know how to do this anymore.
Wow.
I was still working. I did The Mentalist. Sure. I did.
Yeah, you did. You had a lot of TV roles during that time. It seemed like as your kids were growing up that you were still working.
It wasn't the priority anymore. And we definitely did not want our kids to pursue this business. So I remember our kids being in the car saying, what do you guys actually do for work? Are you retired? It was like, don't worry about it. As long as there's food on the table, don't worry about it. We never took them to premieres or anything. And we sent them to a really hardcore academic school, LACES, the Los Angeles Center for Enriched Studies. And that didn't go so well. They ended up at the art school where I teach, and they ended up one being an actor, one being a filmmaker. So you see how well that worked.
Well, I was curious about that because, your son being now a third generation actor and whatever, however much time he did spend with his grandfather in his younger years, in his early years, I was curious, was acting, like you brought up the example of a restaurant family. I mean, was acting a very practical thing, or was it like really creative and free flowing ideas, or was it just, well, this is the business? Like, was there more of a practical business side to what the family did, or was it all kind of loose and flowing, or a combination thereof?
So when my father did he did 3 seasons at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival. And that was one of those places where the first time he went up there, we stayed up there for 2 weeks, and I thought, this has been here all along and I didn't know about it. Oh my God. Because that is Mecca. It's just a dream come true. And I think the second time we went up there, my son, Jack, was in between his sophomore and junior year in high school. Between his freshman year and sophomore year, Kitty Swink asked me if he would be a Fleance and young Macduff in their production of Macbeth. So he went from not being an actor at all, got into Loxa, and then he spent a summer immersed with Rob Nagel and Beau Foxworth and Armin and Jessica Kobzanski directing with Peter Van Norden and all those Antaeus players for all summer. It was like, yeah, I think you caught up to the rest of the kids at your school. And then the summer between his sophomore and junior year, since we were going to be in Stratford, they had a 2-week Shakespeare program. So we did the same thing my father did with me with Williamstown and Shakespeare and Company. So he did a 2-week program at the Stratford Company. And of course, my dad came and we watched their presentation. And it seems remarkable now telling you this, but this was just so normal. So our family conversations would be about, did you see the Hamlet? Yeah, we need to go see what shows are we seeing tonight at Stratford. And then we would very commonly talk, my father and I would talk on the phones about this production versus that Toby. And, when I saw, we talked a lot about different productions, and that was very normal for us. I miss him so much because I miss those conversations.
And I mean, did you have an insight into his process or I'll just, one can assume every actor has self-doubts and things like that. So were you privy to those kinds of, because he gave some, amazing performances, but were you witness to like him not knowing if this is going to work out? And how did you kind of interpret that for your own career? And
Okay. I think it's safe to say, and I would say this to him. He had this amazing relationship with Robert Falls at the Goodman. Yeah. And I think he got a little bit cocky because they did a Galileo. Yep. And they had done a bunch of plays. I think Touch of the Poet. My father would just say yes now to the O'Neill plays, whatever O'Neill play they were doing. Sure. I think he must have at that point had already done Long Day's Journey in Chicago. And Touch of the Poet, I think what he did was he said yes to it before reading it. And he got to Chicago and we were talking on the phone and he said, I've made a terrible mistake. There's no way I can play this part. I'm really freaking out. And I got off the phone. I said to my husband, I said, hey, I'm sure he said yes and didn't read it. That play really, really scared him. It was really hard. And when I flew to Chicago and saw it, my sister and I were clutching each other. We were sobbing. It really cut to the bone. It's all about basically this, I suppose different people will see different things, but for us, what killed us was this arrogant, narcissistic, self-centered man who bullies his daughter and his children, and they pray for him to become kinder and more docile. And then something happens overnight and he becomes this like squirmy kind of obsequious, crawling on his belly worm of a man. Yeah. And it just destroyed us. It destroyed us. And I think it scared him because it really cut to the bone. It cut really, really close, and it made him go, I don't know how I could do this. I will say this. When he did Iceman Cometh, he had been divorced. He was remarried to his wife, who I adore. And Hickey, spoiler alert, has this major, major, major guilt about his relationship with his wife. And I said to my father after the show, so did you find it hard to fathom those depths and go there and go to, go to where the similarities are between you and Hickey? And he was like, what are you talking about? We're nothing alike. So I don't know if he did inside personally and just wasn't comfortable talking about it with me, or if maybe he was just, I'm an actor and this is what I do. Right. I find that hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that
that it would never cross his mind. Right. Yeah.
Or this is another very common thing. There are a lot of actors who don't like talking about the process, who think if you shine a spotlight on it, it goes away. It's ephemeral and it will just, if you analyze it too much, it will disappear. And the power that you have able to go there will disappear if you analyze it too much. So it could have been any one of those things. So, I did try to have a conversation with him about that, but, he talked about Death of a Salesman was like stepping on a moving train and 3 hours later you're there. I know that when I saw him do Death of a Salesman, I saw it in Chicago and I saw it in London. I missed it in New York because I was giving birth or had just given birth. I missed the Tonys. Yeah. I missed the Tonys because I was out to here. So I think I had just gotten pregnant. You're not supposed to fly in your first trimester.
Right, of course, yeah.
So the Tonys, I was about to give birth any second. The Tonys for Death of a Salesman. And it killed me to not be there. But I was there for Long Day's Journey. I was at the Tonys for that. But when I saw Death of a Salesman, especially in London, because he had been doing it for a while, something I don't think a lot of people realize is I'm sure there were other 63, 65-year-old Willies, but at the time, he was the only famous one, the only one of note that was the actual age of Willie. Lee J. Cobb was 36. Dustin Hoffman was 45.
Wow.
Philip Seymour Hoffman was in his 40s. My dad was 63 when he started the Willie journey. And he did it for he did it for a lot of years. He did it in Chicago. Oh, of course, I saw it in LA. He did it in Chicago. He did it in LA. He did it in New York. He did it in London. And I'm going to tell you, he physically could not do the things that he did on stage. It's that whole thing of like the adrenaline of you being able to lift a car off of somebody.
Right.
If you told him, fall down on the floor and then get up, he wouldn't have been able to do it. But he did it in the show. And because of we are his family, when those moments came up, those physical moments came up, we were all like...
Yeah, edge of your seat. Right, yeah.
Because he had really bad knees and hips and shoulders and back pain. He lived in pain for many, many years because of stupid football injuries. And in London, he had a hernia in his stomach.
Oh, geez.
So he was in really excruciating, debilitating pain. Yeah. But also, I really didn't know if he was going to come home from London. I was very, very worried about him. We were you can't do a show with a leaking, bleeding hernia. You can't do that. He had a tear in his stomach wall. It was painful. It was really excruciating to watch. So I just wanted to say that he was 75 when he did Pozzo in Waiting for Godot in Stratford. And then after that, he did Steward of Christendom in LA and at the age of 75. Wow. And that was when I first noticed age catching up with him. That he couldn't do things that he was able to do earlier than that. But he always said, I want to drop, the curtain come down, and the ankles pulled out from under the curtain. He wanted to work until he dropped dead on stage.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, age catching up you at 75 is a pretty good run. We can all be so lucky.
It's a mirror. We do not understand how he lived to be 81 because my father was a famous, I'm not telling tales out of school, famous party man. Party. It's a shame he never played Falstaff because he lived a Falstaffian life. A huge, capacious appetite for everything.
I am kind of curious, you mentioned that lunch you had with your dad where he said he envied you. Do you, well, there's a couple questions I have, but the first one I'll ask is, do you suspect that part of the reason do you think he ever felt that he had to keep working because of, expectations of him or things like that?
It was the only time he was happy.
Really? Wow.
He was happier on a set or actually on stage more than anything in the world. It was like I said, it was like a drug for him. It was the only thing that made him happy. When he said he envied me, it wasn't that he wanted to change places with me. Right. He couldn't imagine what that would be like to only care about your children growing up. And I don't say that to cast aspersions to say he was lacking, it was an interesting relationship. I can't say he would have ever won Father of the Year, but I do think watching your father pursue what he loves doing is a wonderful role model. I don't feel, and we got to travel the world and see wonderful things. And, we were on the set in Italy of Belly of an Architect what we got in exchange for having a dad around all the time, I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't. It was really, really exciting and thrilling and fun. He wasn't envious because he wanted to change places with me. I think he would have liked to know what that felt like. And that's the envy, is that I wish I was built that way so that I could find happiness and joy and solace in that.
Yeah, I think that's a balance or a challenge that a lot of people face, is how do you achieve, or can you achieve, such success in your career and also be, very present to your family or relationships in your life? I mean, I think it's a tough thing to balance. And I think it's about as rare as, somebody becoming a movie star. It's very hard to balance that stuff. I mean, there just isn't time for everything.
Yeah, I remember my son got a job. He was a senior in high school. He was having the third callback, and they said, do not come to the callback unless you are fully prepared to sign on the dotted line. It's a Nickelodeon TV movie shooting in Spain all through May and June. And we sat him down, and this was from his very first film audition. We said, this is the thing, Jack. If you take this job, you have to go to Spain. You miss the play, your senior play that you're starring in.
Yep.
You miss your graduation. You miss the prom. You miss all of these parties and all the end of the year festivities. And their graduation was at Disney Hall. It was a big deal, a big deal. And we said, if you got this close on this job, you're going to get another job. And you never get a chance to do your graduation and your prom, your senior prom, or your senior play. Right. I think that the stress that you will have letting down everybody, making them recast. He really, really wanted to do it. But when we laid out everything that he was going to be sacrificing, and I think that's the thing you have to do every single job. It's really easy ahead of time to do that. But if you're shooting something in Australia or New Zealand, and you're going to be gone for 8 months, and while you're there, your kid gets sick, or your kid has a catastrophe, failing something, needs you. Yeah. Like if I was somewhere else out of town, up in Vancouver, and my kid had a flu and a fever, those are the decisions that we actors have to make all the time. Thinking ahead all the time. And it's only the very powerful can say, I'm getting on a plane. I don't care what you say.
Right.
James, my husband, was shooting episodes of JAG when his father died. And they kept his father on ice at the funeral home waiting for James. It was like another 2 days of filming. And James said, the director said, I missed both of my parents' funerals. And James said to the director, yeah, that's not happening.
Wow.
So you have to make these deals all the time.
Yeah. Well, the other word that you brought up was process, and we talked a little bit about your dad and all that. But what I wanted to ask about is, that you made this transition into teaching, and I know you do a lot of audition stuff and audition coaching. What was the decision there to when did you decide I want to be a teacher? And then, was it a later decision of specifically focusing on auditions?
So I was always, helping friends with auditions. Like people would call me all the time, like casting stuff, and say, I have an audition coming up. Will you work with me? I was doing this for free. And then a girlfriend of mine was like, you're insane. You're really, really good at this. Why are you giving this away? And when Jack got into Loxa, I didn't work with him on his audition for Loxa, but I did help choose his monologues. And I decided to see what would happen if I could help other kids audition for Loxa. And I realized I really, really loved it. And kids would come to my house and we would pick 2 contrasting monologues, one of them Shakespeare. And I loved it. I loved doing it. And so I've been doing it ever since. So it's like been, I would say 11 or 12 years. Kids come to my house, 13-year-olds. We pick a Shakespeare monologue and a contrasting contemporary one. I've also helped adults. I help my husband with auditions. I have a real knack for learning lines very quickly. I think it's from the soap opera days. And I've also worked as a dialogue coach, Patty Heaton on the set of The Middle and Carol's second act. I can help people learn lines really quickly. So I started doing that.
Is that what a dialogue coach does? Is it just like helping actors run lines and memorize them?
Memorizing the lines. Yeah. Making sure the
cool.
actors know their lines. That's a dialogue coach. A lot of people say, there's no dialect in the middle. I'm like, dialect. That's different from dialogue. Just running lines.
She's Midwestern, right? So that's the Midwestern dialect.
Exactly. So I just sit in the trailer and help run lines for the actors. And I really love doing that. So I was doing that. And then at Loxa, we had an opening for the Shakespeare teacher, and the head of the department asked me in November if I would do it. And I thought, oh, why not? You know, it was the only lane that I could have done, was being the Shakespeare teacher. And I decided to try it. And so it's been 6 years of me doing that, but I still do the audition coaching on the side. I did work with a lot of kids auditioning for college, and I love it. I love the alchemy of putting two contrasting monologues together so that when you finish your first monologue and you switch to the second one, the auditors should go, oh my God, this kid can do anything. Right. It's just really, really fun.
Well, and I know you mentioned casting director, but I mean, those are also the jobs of kind of like a director and producer. It sounds like you enjoy all of that, of like crafting something and creating something and finding those moments that for somebody else, not only, you know, that you've obviously spent a lot of time, and, you know, actors, if they don't, well, you know, a lot of actors discover that they need to be able to direct themselves and all that kind of stuff, because you may get nothing from the director except for stand right there. And,
right.
Know, that's where you stand. And I know you had mentioned a piece of text from Macbeth. I wondered if like maybe we could take a quick look at that just so that people can, you know, get a little bit of an idea of what, you know, some of the things you look at or some of the things you focus on. And this is, you mentioned is this a dagger, which I see before me speech. Is that what you wanted to look at?
Well, so what I start off with my kids,
yeah, sure.
I think the hardest thing about teaching Shakespeare is where do you begin? Where do you start? Because so you don't want to turn them off explaining iambic pentameter and spondies and trochees, and because 10th grade brains are, you know, that could be a real turnoff, especially if they're predisposed to thinking this is going to be befuddling and boring and I'm not going to get this. So what I start off with is I give them examples of a prose speech. The one I like to use is Launce from Two Gentlemen of Verona, where he's talking about the dog farting under the table. The kids all get a kick out of that. And then I show them an example of verse speech, and I usually use, "O spite, O hell, I see you all are bent to set against me for your merriment." Not only is it perfect iambic pentameter, but it's rhyming couplets as well.
From Midsummer Night's Dream, right?
From A Midsummer Night's Dream. So then to explore irregular Shakespeare, I use "Is this a dagger which I see before me," which has irregular lines that are, some are longer than others. And
in terms of, just to give people context, in terms of the meter, in terms of the, like, you know, how many, you know, that iambic stuff. Yeah.
How many syllables per line? So is this a dagger which I see before me as 11 syllables? The handle toward my hand, come let me clutch thee. Why are the first two lines have 11 syllables? What does it mean to you? They're tools, not rules. What could be going on for Macbeth? This is right before he's on his way to kill the king, kill Duncan. This third line, "I have thee not, and yet I see thee still." Interesting, the third line is not only 10 syllables, but every word is a single syllable. Every word is a monosyllable in that line. Why do you think that's so? Is that useful information? If not, move on. So, "Art thou not fatal vision sensible?" Another 10-syllable line. And you go down the speech, counting how many syllables are in each line. And then he says, "Or art thou but a dagger of the mind of false creation, proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? I see thee yet in form as palpable as this which now I draw." 6 syllables.
6 syllables, right.
Right? So why do you think, I would ask the actor, is that line only 6 syllables? And to which the student might say, well, what is he talking about? He's drawing a dagger from his belt. So maybe the 4 syllables are where you do the stage direction.
Right. And potentially also comparing the dagger in his hand to the one he see, like holding it up and like going, what, you know, that there's some kind of business, and that's what the actor and or director can create. But I see what you're talking about.
So So there's an embedded stage direction there. As this switch now I draw. You could draw it on those 6 syllables and then, like you say, hold it up. Or you can choose to draw it on those 4 syllables. But like I said, tools, not rules. Look at it and if it's useful to you. And so what I would do with the students, this is something that I learned I did a program at the Globe program for teachers a few years ago, is you would have the kids sitting in a circle in chairs and give each student a line. So each student would have a line and they would count how many syllables are in their line. If you have 10 syllables per line, a regular iambic pentameter line, you sit in the chair. If you have more than 10 syllables, stand in the chair. If you have fewer, sit on the floor in front of the chair. And when we do the whole speech, we go around the room and it's a cardiometer of the character's heart rate, of what's going on with the character. There's a few widely held beliefs that if a speech is a regular iambic pentameter and made up of lines or thoughts that are 10 syllables per line, this is somebody working through something, piecing something together. If you have more than 10 syllables per line, the thought is so big, it doesn't fit into 10 syllables. It may spill over. And so we get an idea of what's going on with Macbeth emotionally and in his heart, the energy that he's carrying inside of him when we map a speech this way. Is he using a lot of single syllable words like moves like a ghost, thou sure and firm set earth here, not my steps, which way they walk. He is not reporting thoughts and feelings that he's had before. He's figuring out his thoughts and feelings at the same time as they're coming out his mouth. He's working through something. So very useful. Then I would look at in the speech, the next thing I would do is talking about the syllables is there's 32 lines in that speech. How many thoughts? I worked it out ahead of time. There's 12 different thoughts. There's 12 thoughts in that speech. Wow. How many of them are questions? How many of them are declarative statements that end with a period? How many of them are exclamations? How many are they midline thoughts that break in the middle of the line or start in the middle of the line? He interrupts himself. He's on a train of thought and then he stops that thought in the middle of the line. What does that tell you about what's going on? How many words are multisyllable versus how many are monosyllable? Why do you think that is? So another teacher that I've worked with has a great exercise where the first word is a thought igniter. So first word, thought igniter, last word, story. And one of the things that I impress upon my students is powering up at the end. When we speak nowadays, we power up in the middle of what we're saying and then we run out of steam, we run out of breath, and you know what I'm going to say anyway. We run out of speed. We have to do the opposite with Shakespeare. We want to build to the end. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. We want to build an energy, tone, and volume towards the end of the thought, making that the most important part. So the first word is a thought igniter, and the last word is story. So we do lots of exercises with igniter, story, ignite, story. Is, me, thee, I, still, art, sensible. So the words are everything. The words are your tools, they're your weapons, they're your magic tricks, and just trying to get them out of their heads, get them out of self-judging, self-analyzing. That's my job. And getting them into their bodies and up off the page on their feet and using all their cells to tell the story.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like there are things that you learned at Hofstra or Lambda or with David Kaplan that you're still using today, you know, in your teaching that you're sharing that still apply?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what I said earlier, which is act the verb, not the adverb. So many times the first question actors ask, young actors especially, how do I do this? How do I play that? That's the wrong first question. The right first question is, what are you doing? What is Macbeth doing? Is he talking himself into this terrible deed that he's about to do?
Right.
Is he seeing the dagger as a warning? Now, my personal feeling, if I was playing Macbeth, is I would use this speech as, I think it's Macbeth's unsex me here. I think he's seen the witches. They told him he's going to be king. Oh my God. And Duncan is staying here. This is too coincidental. This must be the world telling me you're supposed to do this. And the dagger speech, I think, is his incantation to the dark powers that the dagger is marshaling me the way that I was going. It is telling me to go, telling me to do this. I also feel personally that he has enough moments of self-doubt that this one could be the one where it's like, I know I'm doing the right thing. I think everything's telling me and pointing me in that direction. He has, if it were done, when 'tis done, he already has lots of rumination and meditation earlier in other parts where, should I do this? And the scenes with Lady M of self-doubt, that I think it's cool if this is a moment where it's like, thou marshals me the way that I was going. Yeah, you're telling me yes. Now or one half the world. It talks about Hecate's offerings. I think that's what this is his incantation.
Wow. It's, what I love about a lot of this text is that there is no end to the amount of interpretation that we can bring to these things.
Isn't that fun? It's so fun.
I mean, you're only limited by your own imagination, and every actor, will see something or pull something or, glom onto something differently and go, well, what if it's like this? I mean, yeah, I remember when I played Richard III, I was reading all these papers about, the psychology and the mirror effect and all these things about because I was just very interested in that portal into the character of what happened to him as a young child that would lead to this kind of behavior and all this kind of stuff. And then really looking at, watching all these YouTube videos of the different gates and things, like the physical things that people can actually have and what they look like and how they manifest and all this kind of stuff, but just, and again, that was my particular interest in the topic and looking at the character's journey. But, anyone who's played the part or any of these other parts, it's all going to be, well, what do you see that's interesting to you? And what's going to ignite you, to borrow that word in this stuff.
Having said that, I think that if you were playing Macbeth, if I was directing Macbeth, the play, I would do this speech differently than if I was directing somebody doing an audition monologue.
Okay.
If he was doing an audition monologue, the actor, I think, should show a journey. It should start, it should start in one place and end up in another place. So I would, in the audition, start off with fear and doubt and self-rumination and talking himself into, by the end, he's fully resolved to do this. Because you need to show all the variety. You wouldn't do this audition speech the same way you would play the play, especially if you like that idea that, oh my gosh, I bet the witches sent this dagger to show me that what I'm doing is the exact right thing to do, and to be fully resolved through the whole thing. I think that if you did it that way, it would contrast well with, if it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. And that speech, by the time that speech finishes, he's talked himself out of doing it. Right. So it would be different the way you would play it if for an audition than you would if you were playing the character in the part. My feeling.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for all your time today. It's been really a treat to get to know you more and learn more about, your journey, your career. I had one other question. I was trying to think, because we've covered so many different things. You talked about doing commercials when you're pregnant, not getting certain roles or things that you were kind of hoping you would get and really working on. I was just curious, can you think of, and I mean, certainly the Tony and Tina's wedding, there sounds like there was a lot of stuff you did for that was, beyond the scope of what actors were doing for most shows. But is there anything that stands out as one of the craziest things you ever did for your career or to get a job or something like that, where you're just like, man, looking back, I can't believe whether it was to get an audition or to get seen for something or anything like that.
Oh my gosh, I can't think of anything, because usually it's just been auditions. I think self-taping this during the pandemic has been really interesting, and I think it's here with us to stay. There's good and bad things about that. I know that I auditioned for the Orville, and my son, who's a filmmaker, we set up a whole set in the backyard. It didn't go my way, but I'm racking my brain. I mean, the first thing that pops in my head is Star Trek conventions. They are, I love them. I love them. My My first one was with George Takei in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was scared to death. I am great with a script. I am nervous just being myself, and a situation like this where you're just talking. And I felt like the Star Trek fans who were so fanatical, for lack of a better word.
Of course, yeah.
I didn't ever watch Star Trek before the show. It was just a job. I haven't watched it since. People come up to me and go, what about you? What do you think about your character Shelby in the books, the novels? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a job I did when I was 28. But I gotta say, it's very, very moving to go to the conventions and have people care so much. I find it very moving. I was so nervous before my first one that I thought that they were going to hate the fact that I wasn't a sci-fi person, that I wasn't into sci-fi. I literally had 3 Bloody Marys before I went out on stage for my first one. I was just so scared and so nervous.
Do you consider yourself an introvert or are you an extrovert?
I'm an extrovert. I just thought, because, I was afraid of the questions like, what was your phaser frequency set on when you went onto the Borg ship? Like those, you get to ask questions like that. And I'm like, it was a TV remote painted, but people I think people now, I hope, get that we were actors in costume and, but back then in like the 90s, early 90s, people would come up to me and say, when that person was asking you about the Borgs, they weren't talking about, the guys in costumes who couldn't pee all day. They were talking about Borgs. And I'm like, I just don't know how to deal with that. But I think people, now you have all these behind the scenes specials. And I think people have more of a grasp with social media that we are actors memorizing lines. I would talk about memorizing lines. Oh my God. I have lines from that show I will never forget. And I actually use these lessons with my kids, like separate the saucer section, assign a skeleton crew to create a diversion. That line I will carry with me all my days of my life, because
thank goodness for your Lambda training to get all the S's out. I know you said you didn't watch, but hopefully at some point you knew that Den of Geek, I learned this, had ranked your character as one of like the top guest spots on that show. So there you go. You are beloved by the community. So
fabulous. Fantastic.
You can go into the next convention riding high on that. But yeah, no, thanks so much for chatting today. I really, really appreciate it. It was such a pleasure.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Nathan. Anytime.
Hey there, this is Nathan one more time. Thanks so much for checking out the episode today. Please remember to subscribe so you don't miss anything ahead. If you enjoy what you've heard, please let others know. Write a review, post on social media, send an email, tell your entire acting class, or just a friend. I sincerely appreciate it. You can tag us at WAJ Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. We're also on Facebook and YouTube. I'd love to hear what you think of the show. Be sure to check out workingactorsjourney.com for our show notes with additional info and links mentioned in this episode, as well as all the episodes. We've got 25 plus interviews and 12 plus workshop presentations. Sign up for the email list so you're the first to hear about upcoming projects, workshops, and much, much more. Thanks again to today's guest and to everyone that makes these episodes possible. And a special thanks to you for listening. I'm Nathan Egan, and enjoy the journey.